on the Heritage and Indian Trails today on the 2017 Chieftain. All right, we're going to start this video doing our Heritage Trail, and our ancestors were these people, so we're going to find the information in these books that I've been getting, the West Texas Frontier by J.C. McConnell and others that have wrote their autobiographies from the 1840s, 50s, and 60s. So here we go. All right, this is Flat Rock Cemetery where George Washington Stevens, the ranger, is laid to rest. He was the one that helped go try to find Dot and Bianca Bab and them, and later on, after they were brought back into the community, Mr. Bab, the Dot and Bianca's dad, had to ransom them so much that he had to go to work and leave them, and he had to leave the daughters with George W. Stevens to live with him for a while. He had to recoup all of his losses for ransoming his children. So we're here at the cemetery, and we're going to walk back to his gravesite back here and see his monuments. Ranger Stevens was also a sheriff here in Wise County. He's buried in the far right corner back here under the shade trees. Something I noticed is that all these communities from that time, there's also a Hardiman marker right there. I didn't notice that before. Hardiman was the gentleman that was killed in the Valley Springs fight with my great-great-grandfather Will and Tom Bird when they were rangers in Llano and Round Mountain. Anyway, all these communities are back in the cross timbers, they call it, but all these living areas and stuff were kind of protected. And when the trip we made over to the Bab place on Dry Creek, it was the beginning of the plains. The Comanche had a tendency to go around the forts, and usually they found somebody that was either home alone or unprepared for their deal. They would attack suddenly. Guerrilla warfare. A lot of our military training for our United States military today came out of those same way at Cowpens and Kings Mountain. Those early settlers learning guerrilla tactics. So here we go. Come back here through the shade. I can see his marker there. Again, Captain George Stevens. The Texas 13th Legislature gave him a 1873 Winchester. They didn't receive the Winchesters until they were about 1875, 2 years after the fighting took place. The Lieutenant Roberts, D.W. Roberts, was a lieutenant then, and he was also awarded it with Cam Davidson, Tom Bird, Joe Bird. They were kind of spread out all over Texas, but it was because of that Deer Creek fight that Senator King put together a bill to get those guys Winchesters. By the time they got them, the fighting was just almost to an end. But I have those records from the state archives. That's what put me on the path to find these other guys. There was a lot of fellas out here. Stevens kind of ramrodded this outfit almost by itself until he could get him some rangers together, like Hard Putman and Cam and Will Davidson. Some of these guys became captains and that. Our family did not, but a lot of these guys kind of took it on their own. Some people say they weren't real rangers, but they were Minutemen militia, kind of like their grandfathers, great-grandfathers at Cowpens and Kings Mountain. So it was something that they did because they were born and raised to do it, it looks like. It appears, as far as I've found. So again, this is George W. Stevens. He took care of the Bab's girls after they had been recaptured, and then Dot and them, you know, they tell their story in the bosom of the Comanches was Dot or Theodore Augustus Babb's book. And you can also find them in the West Texas frontier by McConnell. There were some first-hand and second-hand stories that people relayed just around the time of the Great Depression. Before we leave here, one other little side note. George's son became a sheriff in Wise County. George also was a sheriff after being a ranger. And his son was killed by a doctor who had been drinking in Decatur. And that story's in the bosom of the Comanches also. Dot Babb related that story in the very end of his book as a side note. He lost his son in 1892, and then George passed in 1893.